The enemy attack came without warning, pinning down the entire SEAL team at the training range. The wounded sniper, bleeding heavily behind concrete barriers, looked up at the old janitor who had appeared beside him. With trembling hands, he extended his rifle. "Take it," he whispered. "I can't hold it steady anymore." What happened next stunned everyone who witnessed it. Welcome to Hidden Heroes. Before we continue this emotional story, tell us in the comments from which city in the world are you watching this video today. And if you think stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button to support the channel. We're growing every day, and I sincerely thank you for being a part of it. Meet Harold Ghost Chen, 68 years old, silver hair always neat despite the California wind, weathered hands that moved with surprising steadiness for his age. For 5 years, he had worked as a maintenance specialist at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, the home of SEAL team training. Every morning at 0500 hours, he arrived to clean the shooting ranges, replace targets, and maintain the equipment that America's elite warriors used to hone their deadly skills. To the SEALs who trained there daily, Harold was practically invisible. He was just the old janitor who swept up their brass, patched bullet holes in target boards, and restocked ammunition. They barely acknowledged his presence, treating him like part of the furniture in their high-stakes world of advanced military training. But what none of them knew was that Harold Chen carried the legacy of one of the most legendary snipers in Army Special Forces history. His father, Master Sergeant David L. Phantasma Chen, had been a Green Beret sniper in Vietnam, whose 134 confirmed kills made him a legend whispered about in military circles for decades. Harold's youth had been spent on his father's ranch in rural Montana, where he had been taught everything about precision shooting that the Army couldn't or wouldn't teach. Every weekend of his childhood had been dedicated to learning the art of the rifle, breath control, wind reading, ballistic calculations, and most importantly, the patience to wait for the perfect shot. "Little soldier," his father would tell him as they practiced at impossible ranges, "a true sniper is not someone who just shoots accurately. A true sniper is someone who can remain invisible, think like the enemy, and strike when they least expect it. The rifle is just a tool. Your mind is the real weapon." Harold had served 2 tours in Vietnam as an Army sniper, achieving a confirmed kill count of 67 that remained buried in classified files. His service record was classified at levels that made it invisible to conventional military databases, sealed away in archives that few people had clearance to access. After Vietnam, Harold had tried to transition to civilian life, but the skills that made him lethal in combat didn't translate easily to peacetime occupations. He had worked various jobs over the decades: security, hunting guide, firearms instructor, never finding a place where his extraordinary abilities were fully utilized. At 63, facing retirement with limited savings and a body worn down by decades of physical labor, Harold had taken the maintenance job at Coronado. It wasn't glamorous work, but it allowed him to be around the military community that understood his service, even if they didn't know the details of his background. Commander Ryan Steele Patterson was everything Harold was not: celebrated, respected, and given every opportunity to excel. At 38 years old, he led SEAL Team 5 with a reputation built on 16 years of successful operations in the world's most dangerous environments. Patterson knew Harold existed. He maintained the ranges where his team trained. But to him, Harold was just efficient maintenance personnel. Professional and reliable, but not someone whose tactical input would be valued in a community where recent combat experience was the only currency that mattered. The training exercise that changed everything had been designed as advanced urban warfare preparation. Patterson's team was conducting close-quarters battle drills and precision shooting exercises when the peaceful morning at Coronado was shattered by an attack that no one had anticipated. At 08:47 hours, mortar rounds began falling on the base with devastating accuracy. The first explosion struck the main administration building, sending smoke and debris across the training areas. Within seconds, small arms fire erupted from multiple directions as enemy infiltrators engaged security forces throughout the facility. "Contact! Contact!" Patterson's radio crackled with reports from across the base. "Multiple hostiles have penetrated the perimeter. All training exercises are suspended. This is not a drill." Harold had been replacing targets at the 800-meter range when the attack began. The first mortar explosion knocked him to the ground, showering him with dirt and concrete fragments. As he struggled to his feet, he could see muzzle flashes from enemy positions that had been established on the hills overlooking the base. His first instinct wasn't to seek shelter like other civilian personnel. Instead, Harold's Vietnam training kicked in as he automatically began conducting tactical assessment of the enemy positions, identifying firing angles, estimating distances, and calculating the resources that would be needed to neutralize the threats he could observe. Patterson's team was trapped in the open, caught between the range facilities and enemy positions that commanded high ground on three sides. The SEALs were using whatever cover they could find, concrete barriers, equipment sheds, abandoned vehicles, but they were pinned down by coordinated fire from enemies who had clearly planned this attack in detail. "Steele, this is base command," Patterson's radio squawked with urgent instructions. "Enemy forces have breached perimeter security in multiple locations. Estimate 12 to 15 hostiles with crew-served weapons and sniper support. QRF is en route, but EAT is 15 minutes. 15 minutes might as well have been 15 hours. Patterson could see his team's tactical situation deteriorating by the minute. They were taking accurate fire from enemy snipers who had positioned themselves with perfect fields of fire across the training ranges. Petty Officer Williams, Patterson's designated marksman, had taken a bullet through his shoulder and was losing blood rapidly. The young SEAL was struggling to maintain his grip on his Mark 11 sniper rifle, his hands shaking from shock and blood loss. I can't hold it steady, Commander," Williams gasped, pressing his back against the concrete barrier as enemy bullets sparked overhead. That's when Harold appeared beside them, having low crawled across open ground to reach the wounded SEAL's position. Patterson stared at the old janitor who had somehow moved through the kill zone without drawing enemy fire. "What are you doing here?" Patterson shouted over the sound of incoming rounds. "You need to get to shelter." Harold looked at the wounded sniper, then at the rifle Williams was struggling to hold. His weathered face showed the same calm assessment Patterson had seen in his most experienced operators. "Commander," Harold said quietly, "your sniper can't engage targets. Your team is pinned down. That observation tower gives overwatch of all enemy positions." Patterson followed Harold's gaze to the range tower that provided elevated position over the entire engagement area. It was perfect sniper positioning, but reaching it meant crossing open ground under enemy fire. "Your civilian personnel," Patterson said. "You can't—" "Sir," Williams interrupted weakly, looking up at Harold with eyes that were starting to lose focus. "I can't make the shots. My hands—" He held up his trembling, blood-covered hands. Harold knelt beside the wounded SEAL, his voice calm but urgent. "Son, I need you to give me that rifle." Williams looked confused, glancing between Harold and Patterson. "Sir, he's our only option," Patterson cut him off, making a decision that went against every protocol he'd ever learned. "Williams, hand him the weapon." With trembling hands, Williams extended the Mark 11 sniper rifle toward Harold. "Take it," he whispered. "I can't hold it steady anymore." Harold accepted the rifle with hands that showed no tremor despite his age. The weight felt familiar, like meeting an old friend after years apart. He quickly inspected the weapon system, checking the scope settings and ammunition load with movements that suggested decades of experience. "I'll also need your spotting scope and radio headset," Harold said to Williams, who was now leaning heavily against the concrete barrier. Patterson watched this exchange with growing amazement. The old man who had been invisible for 5 years was handling military equipment with the confidence of a veteran operator. "Chen," Patterson said, grabbing Harold's arm before he could move toward the tower. "If you can't do this, tell me now. I won't send you up there to get killed trying to be something you're not." Harold looked directly into Patterson's eyes with a steadiness that seemed to come from decades of experience. "Commander, I was making shots like this before you were born. Trust me." What happened over the next 20 minutes redefined everything Patterson thought he knew about the old man who cleaned their ranges. Harold moved toward the observation tower under enemy fire, using tactical movement techniques that kept him invisible to the snipers who were systematically targeting Patterson's team. His approach was so professionally executed that Patterson began to understand he was witnessing something extraordinary. Once Harold reached the elevated position, his transformation from maintenance worker to precision shooter was complete. Through his binoculars, Patterson could see Harold setting up the Mark 11 with methodical precision that took decades to perfect. "Overwatch, this is ground," Patterson called on the radio frequency Harold was monitoring. Target priority is the sniper position at 2 o'clock, approximately 600 meters. He's been keeping us pinned down for the last 10 minutes. Ground overwatch. I have visual on target, calculating wind drift and elevation. Stand by. Harold's voice over the radio was steady and professional, using terminology that military snipers trained for months to master. But more than just using the right words, he sounded like someone who had been having these conversations for 50 years. The first shot came 30 seconds later. 600 meters away, the enemy sniper who had been terrorizing Patterson's team dropped instantly, his rifle tumbling from the position that had been perfectly concealed until Harold's bullet found its mark. "Holy shit," whispered Petty Officer Davis, one of Patterson's youngest SEALs. The old man actually made that shot. But Harold wasn't finished. Patterson watched through his binoculars as he smoothly transitioned to his second target, another enemy sniper positioned on a different hilltop who had been firing at the base's main defensive positions. The second shot came 45 seconds after the first. Another enemy sniper eliminated with surgical precision that would have impressed instructors at the military's most elite sniper schools. Ground overwatch, 2 targets down, identifying additional threats. Patterson keyed his radio with hands that were beginning to shake, not from fear, but from the realization that the man who had been invisible for 5 years was systematically dismantling an enemy force that had his elite team pinned down. Overwatch ground, outstanding shooting, continue engaging targets of opportunity. What followed was a masterclass in precision marksmanship that Patterson would remember for the rest of his career. Harold identified and eliminated enemy positions that his team hadn't even detected, using shooting techniques that demonstrated training from an era when snipers learned their craft in the deadliest classroom imaginable. His third target was an enemy machine gunner who had been suppressing the base's main entrance. The shot required him to calculate bullet drop and wind drift for a target at 750 meters who was partially concealed behind concrete barriers. The bullet found its mark with mathematical precision. His fourth and fifth targets were enemy spotters who had been directing fire for the mortar team that was shelling the base. Harold eliminated both spotters with shots that required him to predict their movement patterns and lead moving targets across broken terrain. By the time he fired his sixth shot, the enemy attack was collapsing. The coordinated assault that had pinned down an entire SEAL team was falling apart as their key personnel were systematically eliminated by someone they had never seen coming. Ground overwatch. I count 6 confirmed enemy KIA. Remaining hostiles appear to be withdrawing to the northeast. Recommend pursuit if you have available assets. Patterson stared up at the observation tower where Harold was calmly conducting post-engagement procedures, securing his weapon and preparing to climb down. The man who cleaned their targets had just conducted a precision shooting exhibition that saved his entire team. When Harold reached the bottom of the tower, Patterson was waiting for him with his surviving team members. Williams, still wounded but stable, looked up at Harold with new understanding. "Here's your rifle back," Harold said quietly, extending the Mark 11 toward Williams. "You might want to have a medic look at that shoulder." "Chen," Patterson said, his voice filled with amazement. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" Harold looked at the SEAL commander who had spent 5 years treating him like furniture, then at the team members who were alive because of skills they never knew he possessed. "Master Sergeant David Chen, Army Special Forces sniper, Vietnam, my father. 2 tours, 134 confirmed kills. I had 67 of my own." He paused, looking at the faces surrounding him. Some things you never forget, no matter how old you get. The silence that followed lasted almost a minute as Patterson processed what he had just learned. The old man who had been cleaning their ranges was a Vietnam veteran sniper whose capabilities exceeded anything his team had ever encountered. "Why didn't you ever tell us?" Patterson asked. Harold's response carried 5 years of being invisible and decades of unrecognized expertise. "When would I have told you? You saw an old janitor. Nobody was interested in what else I might be able to do." The quick reaction force arrived to find the enemy attack completely neutralized and a SEAL team that had been fundamentally changed by discovering the warrior who had been hiding in plain sight among them. 6 months later, Harold Chen was offered a consulting position with the Navy's elite sniper programs. But more importantly, he never again had to prove that experience and skill matter more than age and assumptions. Commander Patterson became his strongest advocate, frequently telling other officers, "Chen didn't just save my team that day. He taught us that the most dangerous assumption we can make is thinking we know everything about the people around us. Today, Harold Ghost Chen runs advanced marksmanship seminars for military snipers, teaching shooters that excellence comes from decades of patient practice, not just official credentials. Sometimes the most elite warriors are the ones cleaning up after the people who think they're elite. This story was brought to you by Hidden Heroes. Have you ever been underestimated because of your age or position? Tell us in the comments about a time when experience proved more valuable than expectations. And if stories like this inspire you, hit that subscribe button. We'll see you in the next one.